All right.
Bro, how you just gonna like not announce that?
I know, man.
I want to
It's like no
him.
build up, bro.
No wonder you were itching to start, man. You're like, yo,
Yeah, I
let's
was like,
start.
yo,
guys.
I need to.
He couldn't
shout out-
wait.
What's that?
That's good.
He couldn't wait.
I couldn't wait. I was like, no, we gotta start. We gotta show this. No, shout out to Canva. They make everything super easy. And shout out to
they do.
Facebook. Shout out to your Facebook pages that allowed me to steal pictures to do. Dude, Canva allows you to, which is crazy, right? I just started playing with it this week, but to take the, what's it called?
The
picture of
background
you
out.
and take the background out, like just
Yeah.
magically. Like you don't have, whereas before I guess you had to go to Photoshop and like draw it out and do all.
Yeah.
Game changer.
No,
So shout out to
Canva, man. Canva's a game changer.
Yo,
Lifesavers.
and if you are, this is what I did with my church. I was able to qualify for nonprofit, and you get the pro account. I don't know if that's
really?
a well-kept secret, but we got approved from our church. You got to file like an application or whatever and see what you're talking and doing, and then you can get approved, and you have access to the.
Damn, I didn't know that.
It's pretty nice. Check it out.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah. But yeah, here we go. New, say new season, but back at Bible Brekkie. How you guys doing? Nobody's eating anything because we're waiting for lunch now since we're in between breakfast and lunch. But
Nah, man.
what we drinking? We got the mate with Brian as usual, per usual.
I had coffee here from Big B. Shout out Big B.
Shout out
Big B.
What you got, Steven?
Yeah, actually, I'm not drinking anything. I actually do have some food. I got some chia, buckwheat, flax, pancakes with some strawberries. But yeah, I haven't finished them yet.
Shame, bro.
Bro. Steven's out here like living the health message, bro.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, literally.
that's what it is, man.
And I just
You
got
know,
a
just-
thing of water. So Hydro-Peak.
All right. Seb might be outdoing you, Steve.
Yeah, no, that's he's about to go on a hike and do the whole
Yeah.
thing. I mean,
That was
he's-
fasting. He's just on, he's just on water.
Water today. It's Friday. It's Friday.
It's preparation day, man. Cleanse the system for the Sabbath. Detox.
Your
Oh man. But
trial run for next Friday.
oh, it's true for I forget. Oh yeah, Easter is right around the corner. So
Yeah, that's true.
that
I
is
just realized.
crazy. Yeah. All the programs we're gonna have. Are you guys having any Easter programs or stuff?
Of course, man. That's when the churches have all their shows, bro. Easter, Christmas.
If you're not doing something.
I wish I could say that we're doing something special. We have baptism in my
Hey.
church. That's
it.
That's
what it's
good.
about.
That's good. Yeah.
that's special. I don't know if we planned it specifically for, Easter weekend, resurrection weekend. So, yeah. Most Adventist churches are like super skeptical when it comes to,
Yeah,
celebrating or
Are really
acknowledging the liturgical calendar. So, yeah.
Or even saying
Really
Easter
weird
too.
relationship.
Yeah.
With
It's
Easter. I
interesting.
don't
Yeah.
I don't get it, man. I feel like it's such a great time. It
Great time
is.
to
Like, you
celebrate
just have a
that.
weird. I mean, you don't have to use the Easter bunny. Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
automatically
I mean,
mean. It's just
call
I
it-
don't know.
Call it Passover weekend, resurrection weekend. You
Passover.
don't need to. Yeah, it's literally like the actual date. So
Mhm.
Hey,
I agree.
that's another conversation. That's another Bible and Brekkie.
Yeah, that's another
Yeah.
Bible break.
Yeah,
We gotta have Bible and I don't know what you call it.
You got to put that scholar thing they have. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
Scholars.
dollar slip ups.
People are like, what are you fighting out?
We should get like a sound effect. Can you do a sound effect with that? Scholar slip ups, like
Like that?
yeah, no, more like
I didn't realize that I was
like
that kind of
like a
foolish.
wah 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 wah. Like,
Nah, you can't. Actually, I should add a little thing to StreamYard to say, hey, you should think about audio features like that.
yeah,
That's a good one.
that'd be
That's a
pretty
good one.
dope.
All right. Well, we're gonna start go into actually what we're here for, which is Ruth 4, finishing up the book of Ruth, and it's been an awesome journey. This was our first narrative, and really go into the story. But I think it's been very beneficial. It's been awesome to kind of unpack the story and talk about it. And so, Yeah, we're gonna jump into it. At this point, if you've been following along, or even if you haven't and are not familiar with the story, long story short, there's 3 women that lose their husbands in the beginning of Ruth, and one is the mother-in-law, the other are the daughters-in-law. One of them goes back to her land, and then Ruth and Naomi chooses to go with Naomi. They show up to Bethlehem, which is where Naomi and her husband were from, and she's there. She works at a field. Ruth works at a field that belongs to a guy that is in the lineup to be a guardian redeemer, which pretty much just means that it's someone that can redeem the family, which is an Old Testament principle that was there for times when people were in debt or were in trouble or lost their loved ones. Someone from the family could come in and purchase their land and help them get back on their feet. And so chapter 3, Ruth goes and pretty much puts herself there to with Boaz to say, hey, I would, we need to be redeemed. Can you do that? And so here we are in the beginning of chapter 4, where Boaz is finally getting up to go and figure out how to help Ruth and Naomi and to redeem them and to provide them with what it is that they need, which is prosperity and posterity. Is that the word? Longevity and just the knowledge that they're going to be well taken care of, even though they don't have any husband or kids at this point. So that's where we're at. And we're going to see what Boaz does if he fulfills his word to Ruth and saying, hey, I'm going to go make sure that this gets figured out or not. So we're going to start up reading here. And it says, meanwhile, Boaz went to the town gate and sat down there just as a guardian redeemer he had mentioned came along, which is pretty funny how the Bible always, what are the chances that as he's going there, the guy's there as well. So Boaz said, come over here, my friend, and sit down. So he went and sat down. Boaz took 10 of the elders of the town and said, sit here. And they did so. Then he said to the guardian redeemer, Naomi, who has come back from Moab, is selling the piece of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy in the presence of these seated here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, do so. But if you will not, tell me, so I will know, for no one has right to do it except you, and I am next in line. I will redeem it, the guy says. Then Boaz said, okay, on the day you buy the land from Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the dead man's widow, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property. At this, the guardian redeemer said, then I can't redeem it because I might endanger my own estate. You redeem it yourself. I cannot do it. Now, in earlier times in Israel, for the redemption of the transfer of property to become final, one party took off his sandal and gave it to the other. This was the method of legalizing transactions in Israel. So the guardian redeemer said to Boaz, buy it yourself. And he removed his sandal. So we'll stop there for the time being. But pretty interesting happenings right there. Any quick words off the bat here?
Or we should use that method in meetings. Just hand me your sandal, man.
I was trying to think of what are some other
sales
other ways that we do that, right? Of finalizing transactions. Obviously, here now we just do mostly pen and paper.
Contracts or something.
Contracts or a PDF, and you file and you sign it. But
handshake,
yeah,
that's a legitimate finality for a transaction.
Unless
handshake deal.
If you cross your fingers in the back, does it still count?
I think that there only needs to be 3 things for a contract nowadays. It doesn't have to be extremely formal, as long as you have both parties mentioned and what is being promised and then signed. Whether you do it on just a sticky note or anything, as long as those 3 things appear on there, it's done. That will hold up in the court of law. So that's what we have now. I mean, I'm remembering, much like Gabe said about the shaking of hands. I'm remembering that movie, Maguire.
Jerry Maguire.
Yeah, Jerry Maguire, right? Where he's an agent. He's a sports agent, and the dad of like a famous like football or some kind of star is like, oh no, my word is stronger than oak, right? And he says, you know, we don't need to sign a contract because my word is stronger than oak. And then obviously he stabs him in the back. But yeah, I think that to today we don't really we want to trust people, but it's increasingly difficult to.
That's good.
Yeah. Hey, what's up? What's up with the town gate? Like literally immediately after he is speaking to Ruth, he goes to the town gate, and this guardian redeemer is there. And I don't know about you, but when I read this portion, I immediately thought of Absalom when he was trying to usurp the throne and oust his father, and his method was by staying at the town gate and talking to the people who were who would come in and out. And then I also thought of Mordecai in in Esther, how they would also stand at the gate, and so it seems like there's a lot of important things that happen at the town gate. I'm not sure if there's like any theological importance to that, but I just took note of the conversation and really the scene happening there, where there's a lot of people coming in and out, and maybe they're as we notice, he gets 10 of the elders to come and sit down and partake as like the witnesses of the transaction, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gabe. I remember in seminary that we took a class and they mentioned how basically come on, man.
As soon as you say seminary, that's a buzzword, man.
Yeah, man, my bad. Basically that was where the initial like judgment happened, would be at the gate, and then like if things got more serious, then they'd go to the king. But typically most of the matters would be resolved there at the gate. Like it was like the first place of like influence and judgment and things like that by the elders of the community. So yeah, what you said makes total sense here. I love the fact that literally the verse before is like, is Ruth coming back from that night that she spent with Boaz? She's telling Naomi. Naomi's like, don't worry, this guy's not going to rest until the matter is solved today. And literally it's being solved today. Like he goes, he sits at the gate.
Literally that day,
yeah, and it kind of shows that he wasn't just like a random guardian redeemer person. He took his job seriously. Like he was there on time at the gate, ready to hear people and to listen to people. And what I found interesting is like the other guardian redeemer has no idea of what's happening.
Yep.
That's what it seems like, because he's like, hey, did you know that Naomi's wanting to do this? And he's like, sure, I'll take it. Yeah. So as soon as the property's mentioned, he's like all in for it. But as soon as the two people are mentioned, he's like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
And that kind of sucks. But I think we're prone to think that way. Like as soon as something benefits us, we're like, yeah. But as soon as we have to like share it or have to use that to provide for others, it's like, nah, I'm okay.
Yeah. Okay. I think it just goes back to our conversation last week as to the fact that Ruth and Naomi more so than Ruth, has to kind of like scheme and plan. Like they're left to float and try to stay afloat and survive, and have to put the pieces together themselves. Whereas like this is supposed to be a society that their first impulse is towards hospitality, but because this guy has no idea what's going on, Naomi and Ruth kind of have to like remind the community, like, hey, this is important. Like you're supposed to help us. So the fact that like you mentioned this guy has no idea what's going on, it's like, are you that aloof? What is it? what was happening. So
Yeah.
I find that interesting as well, Brian.
Yeah.
I like that he also bring, I don't know how early he got up because it, like Brian was saying, right? That's the kind of the impression that the city gate was where business was done before they had to go to the higher ups or whatever. And there was probably men already there throughout the day hearing cases or,
Yeah, and here there are no kings, right? So there's no
Right,
king
right,
yet.
exactly.
So
Yeah, there's
this
no
is
king, there's
literally
no-
like the final
like-
word of
like
everything.
the leaders of the community coming together and dialoguing and sharing
Mhm.
that. So, but it's interesting that, my aunt says that she likes Gabe's background or backflash. So I like it too. I thought. But,
Thank you.
But I think it's interesting that he looks for 10 of the elders, which is interesting. If that was what business was always done throughout the day, they were so I don't know if he's going super early, right? And he's just like, let's go and get this going or whatever, or he's getting 10 other guys. And but I like, verse 4. It's really interesting how the guy's just aloof and doesn't even know. I thought I should bring the matter to your attention and suggest that you buy in the presence of these seated there and in the presence of the elders. So I like that there's like, because he could have, I mean, most of the time when we're trying to agree or do something, and obviously we don't have a city gate and we don't have people sitting there that are kind of helping that sting.
Yeah.
But he really, he doesn't just confront the guy by himself, because he could have been like, yo, you're not following Levitical, you're supposed to be taking care. Like, what are you doing? But he goes through the proper channels. He doesn't force his way, and he does it in the presence of witnesses, which I think is somehow we can maybe apply that to how we do things as well. In our present context, right, of trying to, and I think it's a form of accountability for the guy too, because if it was maybe just Boaz by himself, the guy could have been like, but now that there's, we have to legalize this and make this the right way. And obviously his intentions are, whether good or bad, he's like, I want the land, but I don't want the women, because in some way that's going to endanger my own estate, or other versions say possessions or inheritance. So I don't know if that's because he knows what happens if you have more than one wife, or what happens when you have to split up the inheritance. And he's like, I don't want to have to split it because I have my kids, and I'm not willing to take on that. I want the land, but not the responsibility, as Brian was saying, of having to take care for others. So,
Well, I think the hesitancy on his part, or all out refusal to, redeem the land, is because not necessarily because of Naomi, but it's because of Ruth. She is a Moabite, and I think it's Deuteronomy chapter 23. God had instructed Moses and the people of Israel that they weren't allowed to have Moabites enter into the congregation of the Lord. And he talks about this, like, not even to the 10th generation, and the reason why is interesting is not because, like, they're an inferior nation, or because God is racist or anything like that. It was because when the Israelites came out of Egypt, he says, like, they didn't provide for you bread and water on your way to the promised land. Like, essentially, it's like they didn't show you hospitality. So don't give them peace. Don't extend to them a helping hand. Don't allow them to enter into the into the community. You don't partake with them. And so in his mind, this guy is thinking like, well, if I accept, this land, like if I redeem it, basically if I fulfill the law, right, the requirement in doing so, at the same time I'm breaking it. So it's an interesting dynamic here, because he's like between a rock and a hard place, because at the same time, like, yo, you want to be faithful and help your family and extend hospitality, but then at the other end, you're kind of breaking a command that was given.
Because Boaz says, my bad, I'll let you go, but it's just funny. He just says Ruth the Moabite, right? Like, he goes on to say, just so you don't know, she is a Moabite. So that's great.
He clarifies and lets him know that, hey, this is where she's from.
Yeah. I think everything Gabe said is correct. But looking at this guy, this guardian redeemer, I mean, he's been so negligent most of the story that I really don't think that he has that much of a conscience when it comes to breaking the law, or not. Like, not living by it 100%. So for me, it's like later on, right? Boaz is like, yo, the elders tell Boaz, yo, you're gonna have to provide for this woman, like Judah provided for, what was it, Tamar or
Tamar, yeah,
right? Or like other instances that are mentioned here. I don't remember the others. And basically what he's saying is like, you have to give an heir to this dead father that is fatherless, obviously, because he couldn't bear any children. And in a way, what this guy's saying kind of goes with what Seba mentioned with the whole, what's going to happen to my inheritance if I take on this land. I have to give an offspring to Ruth, because that would be part of my duty of being this guardian redeemer. And on top of that, I have to give this offspring some kind of, possession over something, something. And he's not willing to. He's like, perhaps, what he has to leave that offspring would be a greater chunk than what he would receive by taking on Naomi and Ruth. But either way, I think that probably plays a little bit more in his head than the fact of like, let me walk righteously in the way of the Lord,
Yeah. And you know what, Brian? It's interesting that you shared the example that he gives when he's explaining, I guess the responsibility that he has. One of the examples that he gives is like Judah and Tamar. And when I read it at first, I thought it was interesting because out of all the examples of, like responsibility, of taking care of the family, like that's the one that he chose. I found it interesting because number one, it predates Moses's, reading of the law. Like it's before then, it's before Egypt, it's before any of that. And number two, it comes from like very, you could say, sketchy circumstances.
Yeah. Judah didn't want to take that responsibility.
He didn't want to take that responsibility. He was super reluctant. Tamar pretended that she was a prostitute. She had to like essentially hustle and scheme her way into getting the protection that was rightfully hers.
Right.
And like she's the protagonist, she's the hero of that story. It's not Judah.
Especially the system that existed that day of just
So like I thought it was so cool that Boaz kind of honors Tamar in that regard, in explaining to this dude, it's your responsibility to take this. And the guy's reluctant, as you said. Like I don't know if he's as faithful and interested in fulfilling law, because up to this point, he has no idea that he's supposed to take care of Naomi. Yeah. So really good thoughts.
No, I love that you mentioned that you went a little bit in depth into that, because he's kind of essentially saying, look, Tamar in a way, it's just like Ruth. Like you should be Judah and you should take the responsibility. You should give her the protection that she deserves, and you're not doing it. So allow me. Like I'm more than able, and I actually want to.
Able and willing.
Yeah, more than willing, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. Go ahead, Seb. You were
There's a
sharing
question here, Maria. Glad to have you back, Maria. We missed you. I know work started up again, but
Maria.
Hi guys. So the question is, and this is for Steven. In providing inheritance for a dead relative by giving the widow a child, do they do they marry them? Is it a one-night stand like in Tamar's case? What if this person is already married? How does this work exactly? So I'm just gonna put this up here for whoever wants to take it.
That's a good question, Maria. I think Brian has the answer.
I honestly don't think that they necessarily have to go through the whole process of like, all right, now we're married, you got to give me a bunch more kids. It would seem more of like in a wake of like responsibility. Like now I'm going to provide for you an heir, and you're gonna live under my wing, and I'm gonna protect you up until like your son's of age. He's gonna take his father's inheritance that right now I'm holding for you.
Right.
And so that's the way that I see it. I don't see it as a way like, okay, we're like in this binding
I'm banging
marriage
you
that
too,
from now on, like I get to sleep with you whenever we feel like it,
Right.
and it's cool. No, I think that it was coming more from a sense of responsibility. And you see later on in the story how Boaz is like, I don't just want to fulfill my responsibility. I want to take her as a wife.
Mhm.
So he's specific. And I feel like in him being specific, it allows us to see that there are other instances where it's just like out of a sense of duty, not of like actually wanting to marry and build a family with that person.
And that's kind of what happened with
And
Judah and Tamar too, because Tamar's main thing was like, I need a, my husband died, so that he got another, the brother of the husband, and then Judah's like, I'm not gonna give you no more because there's something's happening, and so she's like, well, I'm just getting, what am I supposed to do? So Judah necessarily didn't have to sleep with her. He could have given his son to her to kind of provide for him. So I like it too that Boaz, and we haven't gotten to that yet, but I guess we'll read in the next section there.
yeah,
But yeah, the whole idea here is that at the end of this next section that we'll read, that the name of the family will not disappear from among the people, right? So whatever that looks like, whether that's, okay, I'm gonna, as he comes in, Boaz marries Ruth and they have children, but whatever that looked like, it was just making a covenant of saying, hey, I'm going to protect you and provide for you so that your name and the legacy of the people that have died in your family, especially the male legacy, can continue, and your name isn't blotted out from the earth.
yeah. And I think it's important to note, I know that we're jumping ahead.
Right.
Boaz, like in his mind, it's not just about Ruth. He's also
Mhm.
thinking, like, mainly he's thinking about Naomi, because he's giving Naomi a continuation of her line through her daughter-in-law Ruth. And he said in verse 17, it says also the neighbor women, right? The women in the city, they gave him a name, the child, saying, there is a son born to Naomi, right? Specifically to Naomi. So Boaz is considering, this whole entire transaction is also by extension continuing the line of Naomi's family through Ruth, and of course, Boaz now being the guardian redeemer coming and doing that. So I think, like, I'm not sure, you guys could correct me if I'm wrong, like in that time when the woman, is married, like all the responsibility now falls to that family to take care of her, even if, her husband dies, she can't go back to her, to her home family. So I think Naomi, in returning to Bethlehem, this is like her late husband's family.
Right.
That's how I understand.
Right.
That makes sense considering the fact that at the beginning Naomi is like, I relieve you of your duties, like go back to your family, because that's what they were supposed to do. They're supposed to keep going with Naomi.
Right. But since Naomi's like, I can't provide for you, and why can I, that's a great point. And I mean, you think of I think of Isaac and Rebecca, when the servant goes and finds Rebecca by the water, she's like, well, let me just celebrate before I, and have this time with my girls before I go. So it really seems like that's the reality, right? Once you got married, you really, and I guess maybe drawing from the principle of Genesis, right? You really, I guess here you would become part of the husband's family, right? And they would take care of you. And you would leave kind of your family behind. And so
I think it was rare for you to see your family again, especially if you lived in like faraway lands.
Yeah, and essentially that's why Tamar has to do what she does. Like, she can't return to her home family because, she'd be ashamed, and, legally they don't have a responsibility to her anymore.
Yeah.
And so Naomi, Boaz is thinking about that. And in Naomi's case, like, well, she's too old. She can't bear any children. So Boaz continues her line through Ruth.
Right.
So in this case, there's not like a descendant or an heir that comes from Naomi specifically, but essentially, yes, through Ruth.
Yeah,
right. And this isn't like some kind of excuse. I think Maria mentioned you put it up
sleeping
a
around
while ago, of like, is this an excuse for guys to like sleep around or whatever? It was literally in this day that was the best way for you to provide for a widow, or just people that didn't have much of or any lineage at all. And so I think that for us today, that looks very different, right? You're not going to go, oh, are you poor and destitute? Let me sleep with you so that
Get married, and
who
give you
knows,
kids.
what happens, and give you another kid to take care of, and you're more into poverty. That's definitely not how it would happen today, but I think that it's a call for us to kind of really be aware of the situation that either our family or our friends are facing, and being willing to take on that responsibility of coming to their aid as we're able to,
Yeah.
or at least guiding them to someone else who's able to aid them. Which in this case, I wish you could say that the other guardian redeemer like guided Ruth and Naomi to Boaz, but he didn't. So I think that that's the way that we need to look at this, not necessarily as like, oh, this is proof that God allows men to sleep around.
No.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it's more, like you said, it's more proof that God's ideal was that we were taking care of one another, and along the line of the history of Israel, we see that the first impulse is not to do that. Like this guy, he's the first in line. He's the guardian redeemer to be, and he doesn't want to do it. And then I think in Isaiah, when God is basically prophesying curses onto the nation of Israel and to Judah, and he's saying that, look, I'm not going to accept your Sabbath or your festivals or any of your sacrifices. Like his main appeal to the people is to take care, like to do justice, take care of the orphan and the widow, because they kept on forgetting or stopping.
Right. And this, I think. Oh, go ahead, Steven. Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, just because we've been referring to that Judah and Tamar story, like even in that story, you can kind of tell like that there is sort of this weight or this sanctity when it comes to sexuality, right? Because even in there's a reality of where he's thinking he's just gonna go have relations with this woman, right? But then she shows the signet and all these things, and it kind of sort of demonstrates like, no, there's something, it's connected to something deeper. It's not just about this act where you can kind of just do it flippantly. It just was something that jumped into my mind, even in that story, where I think, and also you're seeing with this guy where in his case, his focus is the property. Oh, I'm just trying to get the property. But then he realizes, there's so much more that sort of comes along with this relationship or being associated with this piece of land that's much bigger than I'm really willing to sort of be a part of. And in some ways, right, you could say that dude is lazy or dude isn't really trying to, but I think there was some level of still some good, I think, on his end, to kind of say like, hey, like, I don't want this and I don't want to take this on. And sure, it is maybe a bad business idea for him, but I think still, to a certain degree, he's like, hey, well, I don't want everything that comes along with it. And so instead of saying that I'm going to, and then sort of taking advantage of the situation or I'm just going to step out of it. So,
yeah, that makes sense, Stephen. And at the same time, man, it's crazy because, we kind of want to view all these stories with like rose-colored glasses, and you still wonder, what if this guy would have taken, Ruth and Naomi, or how can you really be sure of how God is going to bless you based on you like living out or stepping out? In this case, he'd be stepping out in faith, as in like, yo, God, you're going to have to provide for my family because a big chunk of that I've made is going to go to someone else and someone else's family, someone else's line that isn't mine, that isn't going to benefit me. And so, so how would we like balance like faith and actually looking at the numbers and making a decision based on numbers, and looking at, seeing God and looking at faith and see like, okay, maybe my numbers won't all be there like as I wanted them to be, but maybe God's going to bless me in ways I hadn't thought of before. Yeah. And so that's a big fight, I feel.
And he probably just didn't see, like he didn't really see a way out of that. And I think, and then obviously, as Gabe was saying too, the sort of Moabite element of it too, I think adds to this level of, well, if it's just land, cool, I'm in. But if it's beyond that, then.
But here's the thing, dude. I feel like the whole Moabite aspect, it's just another way that we excuse ourselves from doing what
Yeah.
we know is right, simply
good.
because of like the background that person has, or like who they are. It's like, oh,
Connotation.
It's like,
yeah,
oh,
let me match this,
can't
and
do
we excuse it through like scripture and law, and
Yeah,
I feel
she's
like-
already like Ruth
Right.
has already renounced like
Yeah, absolutely.
all of her Moabite
identity or connection.
identity, tradition. You could say all of that. You know, she has accepted everything from Naomi's God to her customs,
Mhm.
to her, you know, family dynamics. So you could say this guy is looking for an excuse, and rightly so. I think that that's a, you know, very understandable perspective. I also think he's just like, if Ruth wasn't a Moabite, if she was from, you know, the tribe of Benjamin, I still think he'd be reluctant, just because,
Find
as you
something,
said, Stephen, like this, it seems like he's more interested in the land than in the people, and having the responsibility to take care and to feed and to sustain. Like he just wants to extend his territory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, I think of like people who are into like real estate and everything. You know, like they just inherited or just bought like really cheap property in New
Yeah.
York City,
That's exactly what it feels like,
downtown.
yeah.
Like, yo, this is in Brooklyn, right? There's a big apartment building, right? Their first thing is like, all right, we're gonna knock it down and put a
Right.
mall. Because
Right,
I'm
right,
interested in making money. I'm not trying to keep, you know, tenants and, you know, have
Yeah.
people living here. Like I just want to make money.
Yeah,
Mhm.
but in like, if you go along with that analogy, right? In that case, you know, let's say there's people living there, and he's like, okay, well, you're gonna have to provide a place for them to stay and something to kind of get them on their feet. And he's like, oh, well, I'm out. You
Yeah.
know, like that's sort of like, I think of
That's a good
such a
point.
Shark Tank or something. You know, he's like, oh, I'm out. You know, that sort of
Yeah.
idea where it's bigger than what I want.
Yeah.
I find it interesting too as we move forward, right? Just how neither Naomi nor Ruth are there at the meeting discussing their future, right? Which is just
Yep.
the society that's there, right? It's like Boaz that kind of knows about him is confronting the guy that should be the guy that's taking care of them. And it just shows, I think, the society that at that time was just this male dominant. I mean, I look forward to the story of Elijah and the widow. Remember when, you know, the widow that didn't have any food and Elijah comes, hey, prepare me a meal. And the widow goes, and so then, you know, God provides, and she had food for days. And then it says in First Kings, sometime later, the son of the woman who owned the house became ill, and this is why she panics, because she's like, my son owns it, right? So it's so interesting because it's a total different society now. Obviously, women can, you know, have the right, and as they should be, and as they should, to own and have whatever it is that they want, right? But at that point, yeah, that's why it's such a desperate situation, because just literally having a little boy was enough, right? You think of the Keens that were Keens at 8 years old, which nobody would want a president that is an 8-year-old. Like that would make, oh no, I'm not gonna say nothing. But you know, you would want oh, I lost my train. But it would just showed how important it was to have a male figure, no matter the age,
Yeah.
to say, hey, he's the one that can show up to these councils, to these times, and really be the owner of our homes. Even though I'm the mother, it's my son that's maybe 5-6 years old that is actually the owner, and so different times definitely. But great insight there. If nobody has anything else, we'll go into verse 9 and 12.
Well,
Go ahead.
just
Go
on
ahead.
that note, Sebastian, I do you know, I guess since it is, you know, Women's History Month, and we kind of like are delving into this text because of that, I think it's difficult, I think, sometimes for biblical scholars or church people to sort of acknowledge maybe the sort of imperfect element of that culture, right? To try to say that it is sort of the gold standard. I think there's an issue when we try to say like, oh, if we could just get back to this time period. And so I think we have to sort of acknowledge that this is not sort of the Edenic model, right? The idea that I think the ideal that God wanted to take place, that God still works within this sort of construct, and understanding what as we're journeying through, like realizing that the chapter is called Ruth, and that in many ways she's a central figure. And I think it might look as though Boaz is sort of the hero or the man or like this sort of issue right here, but understanding that the liberation and the sort of journey centered around Ruth and Naomi, and God taking that into account even in a culture that was imperfect. And obviously we can relate to that now too. An imperfect, flawed culture.
Yeah. Yeah, because honestly, like the way that Boaz operates, though, granted, he's probably like an excellent stand-up guy. That's the way it seems, but he's also love struck, and those of us who have been love struck, I mean, we're willing to do whatever for her, like, or him.
Guys,
it's
what do you want? Tell me quick. What do you want? Do you want to buy or not? I mean, if you don't want,
Yeah.
it's okay. I can do it, but
wait, you're gonna say yes if I do. Okay, boom, and we go, we do it. And so I think like a little bit is like also Boaz being love struck.
And he's a little savvy in how he kind of like presents the situation to the guy. It almost does feel like he's like, hey, are you sure you want this?
She's a Moabite.
She's a Moabite. Yeah, I don't know.
She's a Moabite.
You know what they
I'm like, yo, would you have had that energy with her there?
He says like, I guess in referring to her, the dead man's widow, right? Which I guess could be applied to Ruth or to Naomi, right? So it's like, Ruth the Moabite and the dead man's widow, like. Oh man!
He starts highlighting her the baggage, right, quote unquote, that she sort of has.
Here we go. I like it. No, and I think it's interesting too because, as you were saying about women's, throughout the Old Testament, even though the society was acting this way, you really see powerful women, right? And if it wasn't really for Naomi's wisdom and saying, okay, Ruth, you need to go to Boaz and present yourself kind of like in this, some sort of, I don't know, we were talking about last week, right? Kind of this like, hey, I want you, Boaz, to redeem me, right? Whether that had some romantic element, not that there was no sensual or sexual act in that, but that really compelled Boaz to get up. I want if Naomi, not knowing what happens, right, and how to do things, if they wouldn't have done anything and just waited, could it be that Ruth would have just been, I don't know, it seemed like Boaz had already noticed her and at some point would have done something, but this, kind of spurred that on. So that women were really working behind the scenes, even though in the front light, it was always, as they say, behind every successful man is a hardworking woman, right? Or just a woman, period, because they're just so good. But
yeah.
I
think here, like we're seeing a story in Ruth of, women who are kind of left on the margins and have to survive. Yeah. And they do so brilliantly and strategically. And their example is just so, great for really anyone who's living on the margins to follow.
Yeah,
and Boaz is a really good ally. I think we're seeing,
that's good.
We're seeing a great example of what it means to, stand in solidarity with a community that is being forgotten.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good. And I think too, you kind of are seeing, and obviously I don't want to jump the gun in terms of the end, but I think even in this story, you're kind of seeing God sort of redefining margins. And we kind of see this played out. Like this story has importance that plays out generations from now, obviously, when it comes to the ultimate liberation of humanity. And so to see that, I think, is just powerful in this story. Because I think it's easy, and in many ways, even as men, it's easy to sort of see like, oh man, Boaz is just this great dude. But realizing that in many ways, the sort of bigger picture, the bigger arc of this story is what's happened with Ruth and Naomi and what ultimately that communicates about God and people on the margins, as you're saying, Gabe.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. Yeah. And allyship that I think men are, because realistically, and that's obviously still true now, this sort of power that the men carried in the culture was not the ideal that I think, it's not the ideal that God believed in. We know how God created the world and what God intended to take place. And so to see that and this sort of acting as an ally is huge. That's a great word that you use there, man, because I think that sort of signifies what the story, I believe, is about. Because it's not Boaz. It's not called Boaz or any of that. It's straight up Ruth. That is the central, and it seems like that's the focus of the story and the focus of God, I think, in many ways.
Yeah, and the phrase that you use there, Stephen, God redefining the lines. Right. Of culture, national identity, what is permitted to happen in relation to the surrounding nations, a Moabite, like who would have ever thought? But like God ultimately is expressing his, his ideal of humanity, which is take care of one another. Like, I don't
Absolutely,
care. Like,
Where
I
they
don't
come
really
from,
care too much about like the whole Moabite Israelite beef that you guys have with each other.
Yeah.
Do it. Like, this is a bigger responsibility.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I think we get caught up in sort of the connotation of that, right? We're like, oh, Moabites, that must mean Moabites are bad, right? Like that's sort of the way we take it. But I think understanding the sort of deeper conversation about that, and I mean, you still see that happen now, where I mean, there's cats that still think that, you shouldn't marry someone of another nationality because that's the Bible sort of, and I'm like, how do we even arrive there? And I think it's just misunderstanding of the bigger picture in terms of what God is trying to do in redefining these margins that I think we set aside that sin has led to. And you're seeing that play out in this story. And so it's just, I feel like we would not do it justice if we didn't talk about that, especially in Women's History Month, man, to highlight, that.
That's beautiful. And yeah, I mean, it's just the idea that God's always moving his people forward and deeper into a more clear realization and living of what he wants, right? Whereas he deals with the Israelites in one way, no Moabites. Now he's like, I'm going to use this Moabite, as we'll see, to be even the mother of one of the people that's going to lead to King David and King Jesus and King Jesus, I guess.
King Jesus, yeah.
King Jesus.
Hey, you got it.
All right. Well,
I think is she mentioned in the genealogy in Matthew or
I think she is.
I'm gonna look.
In Luke?
Yeah, and one of those guys.
Yeah, I think. I'll start reading if someone wants to find that out.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead, Seb. You can read.
Oh, actually, she's not, but Boaz is mentioned. So,
which one?
In Matthew 1, Moab.
Yeah, it's try a different gospel.
Yeah, Luke mentions. Yeah, I think.
I think Luke Boaz, all the women.
Luke mentions
Boaz was the father of Obed by Ruth. So that's in Matthew 1. Boaz was the father of Obed by Ruth.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
There's a name drop. There it is.
And just before that, I mean,
and he mentioned
Salmon was the father of Boaz by Rahab, right? And so Rahab also has his own amazing story.
Yeah.
So
and Tamar as well is mentioned.
Tamar is mentioned. Yeah, that's huge, man.
Yeah. So we got the next 3 marches, ready to go.
The next 3 marches, Tamar, Rahab. All right, so we're gonna finish up here and read this section here. Then Boaz announced to the elders and all the people, "Today your witness that I have bought from Naomi all the property of Elimelech, Kilion, and Machlon. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Machlon's widow, as my wife in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses." And the elders and all the people at the gate said, "We are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your home like Rachel and Leah," which is powerful, right? Because again, she's a Moabite, right? She's not of the people, "who together built up the family of Israel. May you have standing in Ephratah and be famous in Bethlehem. Through the offspring the Lord gives you by this young woman, may your family be like that of Perez, with whom Tamar bore to Judah." Right. Again, going back to the story we were mentioning. "So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The woman said to Naomi, 'Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your strength, your life, and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons,'" that's a powerful statement, "better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The woman living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. And then we have the genealogy of David, of Perez, going all the way to Boaz and Obed to David. So powerful stuff here, man. I love this thing this year, right? I mean, obviously, I don't think we understand the gravity of it, but that sentiment, right? That Ruth is better to you than even 10 sons.
Yeah. I think that's a powerful statement, because if you think of like the world of male dominance and all the privileges that comes with that, to have 7 sons, like you wouldn't be left to, at least you would think, you wouldn't be left to be, fending for yourself on the margins of society.
Right.
But like in this case, Ruth is better. Like she's like immensely, exponentially better than 7 sons. Like the life that she's able to give, the honor that she's able to show to her mother-in-law is much more than 7 sons. That's like, for now we think of that like maybe that's not that big of a deal, but to say and exclaim that, and for Boaz to really, I think, is that Boaz speaking there, or the women of the
women?
Yeah,
Okay,
women.
for the women
To acknowledge,
for
That's
the
powerful.
women in the town to acknowledge,
Yeah.
it means that they've been watching, like they've been seeing, they've been hearing all the things that Ruth has done for Naomi, and they're honoring her in that manner. And then the fact of the blessing, right, that's mentioned, that may have been Boaz that says, may she be like Leah and Rachel, right? Who is that says that?
Those are the elders.
That's the elders. Yeah.
Okay, the elders of
the
the
people.
city are essentially applying the blessing, right? That is it's basically the Abrahamic blessing, right? That I'm gonna extend, your family is gonna be into a great nation, right?
That's good.
And that is made through Rachel and Leah, or continued through Rachel and Leah. So the blessing that God gave to Abraham, the covenant, now is extended to Ruth, a Moabite. So that's not just like ordinary language, like, oh yeah, we're asking that you have a lot of kids. No, like this is, God is bringing you into his covenant, like he's making you a special person, which is like what Stephen said, like the margins there are being blurred. God is making his table longer, and it's bigger. There's more space now.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I like two things that were mentioned, and one, when it comes to Rachel and Leah, when they say, "Yo, you're better than 7 sons," she's, what they're saying essentially is like, Ruth, you're better than the sons that Rachel and Leah bore to Jacob. Because if you were to like really look at how many sons they each bore, I know that Rachel bore 2, right? But I don't remember how many Leah. I want to say 5, but I really don't remember. So in a sense, it's like, yo, you're better than like these children that were promised to Jacob and to Abraham, in a way. Like your actions are better than what these men did. But also, dude, so this is what is kind of cool. So the first son that is born to Boaz and
Ruth.
What's her name? Ruth. Yeah. Sorry. The first son, wouldn't that be the guy who takes up, right, the mantle for his, dead
Right.
mom's husband? Right. And so I feel like, in a way, when you look at the genealogy of David, you have, 2 times where this happens, where one, Perez, right, which would be like I read that in Spanish, I don't know why. Why, you'd have him who is essentially the first born of Tamar, who had to trick Judah into giving her a lineage for her dead husband. And the same way you have, that's how Boaz comes around. But in the same way, you have Ruth, who has to, give birth to the son who now belongs to her dead husband's lineage. And in a way, what I feel like you're seeing, or what I feel like I'm reading here, is the fact like that this lineage is kind of born out of what the women have done, and what the women have done for their dead husbands. And like the guy had nothing to do with the fact that out of his lineage would come David, and eventually, Jesus. He had nothing to do with that. He just died, not bearing any children, not doing anything. And Ruth really took this all upon herself, and finds herself to be like part of this exceptional lineage that just gives way to Jesus, and it just speaks to like how God is just always, women are always on God's mind, like from the very beginning. And like when I imagine what happened in the Garden of Eden, like when mankind fell or whatever, God spoke to both of them. He didn't speak just to Adam and was like, "Yo, tell your woman that this was gonna happen." So I don't know when the heck like this whole male dominance occurred, but that was never God's intention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And in no way does that come across in Genesis chapter 3. And in fact, in Genesis chapter 3, he tells the woman directly, like, your offspring, like what you will do, what you will bear, what you will give fruit to will bring about the redemption of mankind. And you see that lived out in both Ruth and Tamar, since we spoke about Tamar today as well. As they had to kind of just hustle their way into this lineage that God is just, wow. I love that. I love that.
Yeah, that's powerful. Maria,
Which has nothing to do with Boaz, has nothing to do with Judah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right there. Maria, how come the women named the child and not the parents of, or Naomi? Or am I reading that part wrong as to who named him? Yeah, it makes it seem like it's the women that named them. And because they say Naomi has a son and they call him Obed, which I'm guessing is the meaning for Obed. So it may point to how
it just says they named him. I want to say like it was their parents that named him. It doesn't say like it was the women
that named him.
Well, I said the neighbor women gave him a name, saying a son has been born to Naomi.
Oh, mine just says they, like in general.
Yeah.
And they named him Obed.
Someone break out the heat.
Someone look at the
Let me go to accordance real quick.
Who named?
I mean, maybe it was a communal. I don't know. It's just speculation.
I feel like the whole community is in on this story too. So I mean, it could.
Absolutely. It feels like just this positive experience for the entire community, especially the women and even the men. I think just what it all symbolizes. And I think while God is not mentioned in this story, I think even they are sort of realizing the power of God and sort of some of the things we're talking about in terms of who God is, the character of God, and what He desires. I think they're seeing that, and it brings the whole community together. And they feel as though this birth is different, right? Because I think and Brian was kind of saying it, we all were kind of saying it, that the idea of having sons is typically the one that you celebrate. That is the idea that if you have a son, that is where prosperity happens and good things happen. But here to see like now your daughter-in-law is being used by God to carry, I think it shifts the entire dynamic for them. And I think they're probably just, I don't know, it feels like a community naming. I don't know, like that's something that at least in I think at least in my culture, like in India, like that was kind of a thing that you did. Even now, like some prominent figure in your community or like a group of you kind of name your kids. At least that was at least the case in my family. I don't know if that was across the board, but that was something that is not sort of out of the ordinary.
Shows the involvement of the community and how they're going to be blessed through it too. So that's beautiful.
Yeah. And the ESV says that a son has been born to Naomi. That the women of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. So I guess the women gave him the name.
Yeah, I think what's happening here, it could be like the ripple effect, essentially, of Ruth and Naomi, and then Boaz as their ally, as their kind of like intermediary between the guardian, redeemer, and such. It really puts things into perspective, because Boaz knows what he's doing when he invites those 10 elders to be a part of the conversation. At the gate, right, where typically these kinds of judgments would occur. And that's an important part of the story, because without the 10 elders, number one, he's not going to be able to ratify the transaction that he's made with the other guardian redeemer. And then number two, I think what he's doing is important because he's making more allies now, not for himself, but for the sake of Ruth and Naomi. Because if in years to come he were to neglect his duty, or his descendants were to neglect their duty, right? There's a story of elders who all witnessed the responsibility of taking care of Ruth and Naomi by Boaz's family, right? And now they have to live up to that. If not, the elders will hold them to account. So I think this is a story of, like, more allies being created. And then it also goes to tell you, I guess, that there's always people watching.
Yeah.
Like, all these people that we didn't know were in the story and involved, like the elders, and now like the women of the city naming the child for Naomi. Like, they've been watching. Where were these eyes before? Like, we didn't see them, but they were there. They were taking part of the story, and they were given voice by Naomi and Ruth. To speak out now and to have the blessing of naming the child who would eventually become, part of the royal family. So I think this is great. Like, this one act of Ruth and Naomi all of a sudden gives voice and emboldens the women in the city to be part of the story as well.
Yeah, and that is very much so, at least seemingly, sort of a countercultural idea. And I think even much so, even in our society today. And we were just looking at Matthew 1, right? And looking at the people that were mentioned. And it was all sort of women who did what you're talking about, Gabe, like kind of stepped out, did something that was, unusual, or maybe stepped outside of their normal, quote unquote, role, and did something that, sort of inspired and gave hope to the community. And I think, like, it's a ripple effect, and you're seeing that. And that, I think God even still, I don't want to say rewards or recognizes that, when you take that leap, when you take that step to do that. And because Ruth and Naomi, had they just sort of been passive throughout the whole situation, we may not have, arrived here, but I think they knew what it took, and they were allies for each other. And it now is resulting in this. With of course the help of God,
Yeah, and apparently, like, the name of Obed, like, means worshiper, like worshiper of Yahweh in this case, which is really cool, because like the whole story just kind of ends in this like huge like worship setting of like people praising God for what had happened to Ruth, but also what Ruth's action kind of permitted to happen to her. You know what I'm saying? In a way, I think that many times we're just waiting around for good things to happen to us, to have an excuse to worship God. And at the end of the day, what Ruth is kind of showing us is like, no, you need to move. Like, you need to move out in faith and in loving kindness towards your neighbor and those who perhaps are marginalized and in needful situations, and be like Ruth. And there's gonna come a time where, dude, you're gonna have like the best reason to worship God, which in this case for them was the coming of Obed.
And I thought it was beautiful too, how like the beginning of the story, chapter 1, they get to this town, and the town is in an uproar, and it says the women exclaim, "Can this be Naomi?" Right? And here at the end, it might be the same crowd of women that are like, pronouncing these blessings and saying, "Hey, wow." And so again, just highlighting women that many times in this culture wasn't really something that's brought up. Next story you hear after this in 1 Samuel is the story of Hannah praying for a son. Right? So it's again just the whole idea where, one, God can make, like I cliche, take our mess and make it into a message, but bring good out of just crazy and broken situations. Right? In the story of Tamar and Ruth, where they become descendants of David and then of Jesus further on down the road. And it's just beautiful how God turns it around, and in that is weaving these ideas that are countercultural, as Gabe was mentioned before, and how they go against the values of society and say, no, you have to go even further than that. And now, there are no barriers now. It doesn't matter if it's a Moabite or Ammonite, wherever you're from. Now, when Jesus comes in the Sermon on the Mount, you heard that it was said to you, before, but now I'm telling you, we're taking it a step further every single time. So,
Yeah.
beautiful story.
And you can really see how God actually blessed Boaz and Ruth, because later on, at least from this line, you have David, and you see like, okay, David has quite a few brothers, and they have all these riches and land that David has to take care of the sheep or whatnot. And so you see that God does come through and excessively bless these people that have been faithful to him.
Yeah.
And Maria brings up this point. We need to bring back the concept of pronouncing blessings on others, right? And I think that's the beauty of the Old Testament too, even in the value of names, right? And how you're named. What was it that Obed, his name was, worshiper of God?
But I do feel like they're pronouncing these blessings not just to be like, oh, I hope this happens to you. They're pronouncing these blessings because this has happened to you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a foundational difference from what we see a lot of times, where you have a lot of preachers who will pray and like have like this whole blessing on you, but it's like a prayer that, oh, I hope this happens in your life, and it's not really like, have I showed that that's a blessing that I'm living out in my own life, or something of that sort. And that's the blessing that they do here, I feel. And so because of what they've seen happens, they're like blessing her and saying like, yo, more will happen
because of what's happened. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Ooh, all right, Ruth. We'll see what our next book is. We'll figure it out. But that was a great narrative, great conversation, guys. A lot of depth in here. I'm actually preaching about it tomorrow as well. So
yeah,
I'm got
go for it, man.
But
yeah, for sure.
All right, we're moving into our lightning round as we close up here. And I guess we'll go back to, we kind of had the question last time. I don't know if we answered it, but are you guys watching anything? We talked about what we were reading last week.
I think we're all watching, the, what's it called? Eagle, Hawk, Falcon
and the Winter Soldier.
Yeah.
Soldier.
Sucks is only 6 episodes, right? Like they're like, oh, a 6-part series or something like that.
Yeah. I'm actually watching F1 racing on the series on Netflix. Pretty good. I didn't think it was gonna be good, but a friend got me on it, and I don't watch the races, but I've watched the recaps, and it's like the recaps for the year before. And it's pretty interesting because the first couple of episodes were like their season was starting, that first couple of weeks that everything broke out over here. So seeing their reaction to like, yo, the NBA closed and the US is shutting down, and they were about to race, and they're like, we're calling this race off, and people are like, what's going on? So it kind of it made you relive the initial stages of the pandemic, which was crazy. So F1 pretty interesting storyline.
Yeah. I'm watching Captain not Captain America, Falcon and the Winter Soldier as well. And I'm also a big fan of like the singing competition shows. So right now, American Idol is back, and The Voice as well. So I watched both of those.
You watched The Masked Singer?
No, I don't watch The Masked Singer. I don't think I've ever watched that show, but The Voice is probably my favorite out of the two, of American Idol and The Voice. That's like a really good show. The judges are fantastic, and I think the talent there is a little bit higher typically than that of American Idol.
It still amazes me that American Idol exists. I'm not taking shots, but I feel like, like it had its peak like 10, 12 years ago.
It did. And then it
like it's just kind of is treading water, I feel like, almost.
Yeah. It went down once they had like Jennifer Lopez, and like they were still trying to keep like Randy Jackson involved with it. And then they essentially folded. They didn't have American Idol for a couple years. They rebranded now with Lionel Richie, Katy Perry, and Luke Bryan. And I think they're really good. I think they're better than the original, like Paula Abdul, Simon Cowell, Randy Jackson kind of trio.
Yeah, I'd have to check it out.
Well, I think American Idol is also a lot more broad when it comes to like the talent that's coming in, where The Voice is just like, yo, you gotta sing good,
Yeah, absolutely. American Idol is like more like, all right, you can have a good voice, but like you can get really far if you have a better story.
Yeah, I mean, what's that one guy that won with like the gray hair? Like I always think about that Taylor Hicks, and I was
Taylor
like,
Hicks,
it's not even like.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to. I mean, he's a good singer. He sings better than me, but you know, it's just
out
like
there
there were definitely people that sang better than him that year. You know?
Absolutely. Even last season for American Idol, the winner wasn't like anywhere near the talent level of singing than the other finalists. The thing was she had a better story. So people will often vote for the story that they like more than the voice.
Someone they resonate with or something. Yeah.
The singing. Whereas like the voice, right? Yeah, Pastor Kelly's Michael Kelly's daughter's on the voice this year. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, the voice for me is just like all about singing. You know, your story doesn't matter much. If you can't kill it, you know, if you don't have pipes, you're going home.
All right. So that's what we're watching. Very good. What about this? How's your March Madness brackets going? And your predictions?
Pretty bad so far.
Is Rutgers out?
Rutgers got eliminated Friday. They lost against University of Houston. They were up by 10 points. They were up by 10 points in the second half with like 3 minutes left, and then they blew the game. So yeah, pretty bummed about that. Since then, I'm not really watching. I know Syracuse is still in it. Pretty,
we got
big school around here.
Taylor's still in it. That's my pick. So we'll see what.
Yeah, South Alabama's still in, so I'm good.
Okay.
My pick's still in, and then on the women's side of it, I'm from South Carolina, so obviously the number one seed is South Carolina women. So
yeah,
you know, hopefully they get another chip. But yeah.
So, I think like most Pac-12 schools are still in it. Big Ten, almost everybody got eliminated. Big East, you know. Few schools.
A lot of upsets, and Loyola College.
You like
Chicago.
Oral Roberts University. Like what?
Yeah.
Are they like a bunch of dentists? Like what do they do?
Oral Roberts, I think that's a Christian university, like very small private school that has just upset really big schools.
Oklahoma. Yeah,
they've won twice, right?
Yeah, like big upsets.
They beat Florida.
Oh yeah, Florida. Sorry, Brian. I know Brian was really invested.
Yeah.
Dang it! They embarrassed me.
Loyola beat. Was it Illinois?
Illinois.
Yeah,
and Georgia.
And they were like ranked. They were like the first seed.
And Oral Roberts is playing what? Arkansas. I mean, I feel like that's an easier game than the ones they've just had.
I know.
Ohio State and Florida. So
yeah, Ohio State, which was fantastic all year long. And Florida, which is still a tough school to beat, you know.
When you're like that, when you have that huge upset early on, I feel like the matchups just get a little bit easier as you go.
That's true because you're playing such a high seed. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Their thing is their only danger is, you know, when you win big games like that, you tend to like celebrate as if
too much,
won the whole tournament.
Like that is the championship.
Yeah, and it can kind of drain you, that whole celebrating process. Like you leave all your energy and your emotional, like, you know, excitement in the past game, and then you head into like, you know, a game against, who are they playing? Arkansas, you said?
Yeah, Arkansas.
Like that's a much easier school, so they should be able to beat Arkansas. But it's quite possible that they don't move on after this. I mean, they have a fantastic story to tell.
Either way, it's a win.
Yeah.
Sorry, these are just like one game matchups.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Once March Madness comes in, it's just one game tournament. Not one game tournament, but you know.
Yeah, it's a knockout.
It's knockout.
Whoever wins goes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can kind of see just in a nutshell. This is how the bracket kind of looks. And then you have one game. So this is the team we're talking about. Oral Roberts. They beat Ohio State 15. They're ranked 15.
Yeah.
Dang.
They beat a 2.
3-point wins right there.
That's close, but
yeah. And Loyola Chicago, like that game wasn't even close. 71-58 against Illinois.
Hey, they dominate. I don't know why people were picking Illinois though. Like I just I know they were number one, but still. Number one.
Listen, Illinois had a fantastic season, but Rutgers beat Illinois throughout the season.
There's certain teams you can just tell, like even though they're really good, like they just aren't.
Yeah.
They just aren't material to.
Texas. Yeah.
I was.
Hey, Florida State's still in it.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
There you go.
I got a team
Against Michigan. Michigan's a really good school, bro. That's one of the top teams.
Yeah.
They suck. I'm just kidding. Yeah.
Oregon,
I don't know anything.
USC.
Yeah. I think like they were I heard on the radio this morning, I'm not sure how true it is, but like out of the millions of brackets that were submitted online,
There's like no perfect one, right?
Everyone has been like eliminated. There's no perfect bracket anymore because of all the upsets.
Loyola and Oral Roberts, I think, messed everyone up. I think more people, because they knew Loyola went to the Final Four the other time, they're like, maybe. But Oral Roberts, you're like,
yeah.
All right,
just setting up for Alabama to take it.
Baylor's coming through. Last question here. Any thoughts? I was talking with someone yesterday about how it seems as we're transitioning to what life was kind of, we know life is not going to be the same as it was before, but with vaccines and everything going on, you're like, okay, it seems like nothing really has changed outside of COVID, right? And so you have another shooting this week after a week where there was shootings at a massage spas and whatnot, and this one was in Boulder, Colorado, and just crazy that this is kind of what we can not expect, but is what seems to be happening now that people are kind of coming out now and going about.
Yeah, literally my first reaction was like, well, there's two reactions. One was we have some friends in Boulder, and I texted them, make sure they're okay.
Yeah.
And then it was just like, America's back, which sucks, like, now that people are back out and about, that, we just kind of return to what we always, there's like a text in the Bible around like a dog returns to his vomit. We just continue to sort of just go back to what we always do. And it's frustrating reading up the story on the guy. It's just wild, man. I don't really know what there is to say. You don't even really sort of react anymore. You're just like, dang, I hope no one I know was there, which is crazy, which is a crazier thought. I think maybe in some ways it's, and you think about, literally right after that, we were like, we need to go into, I think we were going to Costco. We're like, dang, what happens if we go to Costco and like, something happens, right? You're just like, how that's a real situation. And even in our church, how do we, our church is primarily a lot of older members, like, what would happen if somebody rolls in? And I mean, it would just be a field day, unfortunately, in the wrong way, for them. Right, and it just sucks that that's such a reality. And then how there is, I don't know, a reluctance to, it always feels like there's some level of reluctance to really acknowledge, some of the factors that play into these things. And then also bypassing some things that are factors. And that's a difficult and frustrating, but there's not a lot to say, man.
No, that's true. That's a good point. There's not much to say.
I just pray for the family, of course, but that still just doesn't feel like enough. It doesn't feel like.
It's not enough. I think one of the most disturbing elements was that like days prior to the shooting, there was a I don't know if it was a bill or a law that was appealed by the NRA like days before. It was like, gun restriction, essentially a gun restriction law that the NRA appealed and won the decision. And so basically buying guns, like high ammunition guns became easier in that state. And the perpetrator, the guy who, bought the gun and killed all these people, had done it like immediately after that decision was made. So it just goes to show like, some of these laws that are, common sense kind of gun laws that are there in place to make it harder or more difficult for, very bad people to get their hands on these kinds of, weapons, they work, and the only reason why they want to take it down is because there's money involved.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a shame,
Yep.
Yeah.
And just like we were talking about in the story with Ruth and sort of like the culture, right? I feel like oftentimes it goes back to sort of this like, well, it was written in the Constitution, right? The forefathers, whatever, it kind of jumps back to that. But I think there still has to be an acknowledgement that even that wasn't perfect. Like there were there were so many things that were imperfect and wrong about even that were going on in that time period when that was created. So, 1776 is not the ideal for society. There are things, there are discrepancies, there are things that are very much glaring issues that are missing from that. And it's just something that I think about.
Yeah, I think that, and I'm not a pro like guns and things like that, but just looking back at history, what bothers me sometimes is the argument of like, oh yeah, no, we need to bear arms, and it's like, bro, do you know what kind of arms these people were bearing in the revolution?
Right.
Like the only thing, maybe some kind of hunting gun that could help you get the food for that day. It wasn't really they didn't have what the British military had. You know what I'm saying? And so I feel that today we made it so accessible simply because, oh no, right to bear arms. If the government is going to come against me, it's like, what are you talking about? And we forget the fact that, or at least Christians tend to forget the fact that that happened because that God desired it to happen. It needed to happen in a way that you look at the Civil War. I mean, not the Civil War. You look at the
Revolutionary War.
The Revolutionary War. Thanks, Gabe. And you're like, yo, there's no way these little colonies are going to be able to push back against this huge empire. And there really wasn't on paper. No way. And so I think that if the time ever came for you to have to fight your government, dude, if it needed to happen, it will happen if all you got is a pitchfork,
Gun versus bombs. I'm like, I mean, at the end, if you ever want to,
it's just garbage, man.
And then even I think about too, there was, I guess, was it last week when they found a dude who was outside of, Kamala Harris's house, with which is tons of ammunition. He could have killed the whole block. And so I had to text my auntie, make sure she was okay. Kamala, make sure she was good. But
it's crazy.
Yeah.
And sometimes these events kind of inspire other people too to say, oh, I can do that too, and go right. And just common sense laws.
Yeah, especially when other people are excusing that behavior with poor guy, he just had a bad day. It's like, really, man, really. And so when you see that on the news, you're just like, oh, okay, it's not that bad. I can do.
And not everybody's afforded that either. Not everybody is that same. If that was consistent language that we used all the time, then it would be. It would still be bad, but it just is salt on the wound,
Really, Seba?
Yeah, I guess that's the question. What do you do when you have a bad day?
Oh man, I sleep it off.
Yeah.
Is Gabe frozen or is he just not blinking?
I think he's frozen.
Yeah, I think he was freezing. I was confused by that too.
Yeah, I was like, wait.
He said, "What's going on?"
He's looking really, really intensely.
Really intense.
Yeah, he does not approve of your questions, have I?
This conversation is just. Oh, he's muted.
He's muted himself.
Oh, my stand here is falling apart.
I feel like nowadays when you're going to school and you have your Zoom cam on, if you make your background just maybe a video or a GIF background as you're actually moving in it, and you just leave, so the teacher thinks that you're still there. I've been learning how to do that from some of our students here.
He said my internet just tanked. He texted me.
Well, I guess that's a sign for us. Oh, he's back on. We got two games.
Oh, the fifth guy.
We got two Gabes.
We got two Gabes now.
What's up? What's up?
If you come
Hey.
How many games is better than 7
Let's get three.
times?
Let's get three.
get
Let's
three.
get three.
Oh, there we go. All right, we're good. Oh, okay, it disappeared. All right, well, we're closing up. Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, guys, for the conversation. Really great. I hope you guys have a great weekend and join us next
Yeah.
week, same time, same place. And yeah, we'll see you all later.
No promises.
No problem.